So we're here to talk about funding today. Yay, money. Yay. Someone made a joke earlier this morning at one of the roundtables about how they went to museum studies so they would never have to deal with numbers and math. And I was like, me too, except that's all I do now is numbers and math. So, but unfortunately, it's kind of important sometimes. So I guess let's just introduce ourselves really quickly. Monica, would you like to go first and introduce
Sure.
yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I was really disappointed I wasn't able to be there in person. I love Valdez, and I love museums, and I love all museum people. So I'm really disappointed, but luckily we have just come out of a pandemic and know how to do this virtual interaction quite well. So I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Monica Garcia Ichuak. I'm a program officer with the Rasmuson Foundation. I know many of you. I've been in Alaska about 13 years. I came up here specifically for a job at the Anchorage Museum way back when during their second expansion, to take a job as the Director of Education and Public Programs, and have been in museums prior to working at Foyaker and the foundation for about 20 years. So I still sit on the Pratt Museum board, and I'm super excited. I'm working with a young, thriving entrepreneurial group in Anchorage, starting a children's museum. So I'm pretty excited about that. And as a program officer, I do a lot of the tier ones and the tier twos, which I will talk to you about, as well as some other funding sources that you might not even know Rasmussen, the Family Foundation funds. So I'll just leave it at that and pass it to Sarah.
Thanks. Great. Well, hi, everybody. Sarah Glass. I'm going to try my best not to ignore our people online too, but I'm going to mostly talk to you guys. Sarah Glass. I'm with the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS. I've met several of you so far today, but hello again. I am actually their newest senior program officer on the Office of Museum Services. So we've got the library side, the museum side. I fit squarely on the museum side, although I'm trying to bridge across that aisle, if you will. We're based in Washington, D.C., so work in downtown DC. I live about 6 blocks north of the White House. Would I rather live somewhere like this? Yes, I would. So still working on getting them to approve me to be remote, but not there yet. But I'm loving to hear that there might be a children's museum planned for Anchorage, because I actually just spent this past week with one of my best family friends, grew up with her. She lives in Anchorage with her 2 young daughters. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's plenty to do around, but a children's museum would be very fun there too for them. And my sister lives in Fairbanks and teaches at the university up there. So I've been very, very lucky being a person from central Illinois, actually, to get to have been in Alaska and visited Alaska many times for the last 10 years. And it was one of my goals when coming, before I came to IMLS 6 months ago. I actually worked with the National Park Service for the past 6 years at the National NAGPRA program. So any of you that were at the NAGPRA session earlier today, that was awesome. Good job, Monica. It was really just an honor to get to work on that, giving out grant monies to museums and tribes across the country to do their NAGPRA work. So I'm happy to talk about that as well. But now, and before I was at Park Service, I was at IMLS. So I've kind of been hopping a little bit of frog hopping here back into what I love to do, which is help museums and tribes, Native American tribes, Native Alaskans, Native Hawaiians, get money to do their projects, to do the work that they need to do. So that's why I put in for this with Dixie and Monica, and I'm just like thrilled that my office agreed and let me actually out of the office and out here to be here in person, because I think it is a huge difference getting to talk to folks face to face and like talk about, you can always call us up, but this is just so much better. So yeah, that's a little bit about us and where we come from. I've lived in DC for like 15 years, never, ever, ever, ever meant to live there that long. I moved there for a Smithsonian internship at the National Museum of the American Indian back in like 2008. And all I had was a suitcase and like found a room on Craigslist the night before. And then I never left. So still there, fell in love with the museums. Everything's free. It's a good place if you're not in politics. So yeah, that's me. And yeah, we're going to talk to you today about some of our different programs and just how that looks, how what they all are, what we offer. And then we really want to leave a lot of time. We're not going to talk super long. We want to leave a lot of time for us to kind of all discuss project ideas or thoughts, or answer any questions, whatever you guys want to hear about. If as we're spewing out our information, right? I know me particularly, there's lots of acronyms I'll try to make sure I'm clear with. I tend to talk very fast when I get going, so just want to make sure we have lots of time to actually chat about what you guys are interested in, what you picture, what you dream of, what you need funding for, things like that, and how we can help. We're the government. We're here to help. I can say that. Okay. So Monica, did you want to should I set up your presentation, or are you good to go?
Yeah, I think I can share my screen. I think the one thing I would say is I think most of us who came to Alaska, if you weren't already born and raised in Alaska, also had a short-term plan. And years later, we're still here, right? Like Alaska gets in your head and in your heart in a way that you can't imagine leaving. So
it's very true.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So hopefully everybody, Dixie, you can.
Looks good.
Does it look good? Are you guys see a blue screen that says Rasmuson Foundation, Museums Alaska? Excellent. Okay. So I'll just kind of like walk through this PowerPoint. I really want to make sure I just put this up here. We have until 3:45 to have this conversation really about grant making across the state. I think what I'm super excited about is that at a micro level, we're talking about local funding with the foundation, with Rasmussen, which is the largest funder in the state, but really collaborating and thinking strategically and leveraging IMSL funding at a national level. And I think some of the conversation Sarah and I had was really this opportunity to think about, how are we thinking about this grant making? What are our projects that we want to move forward with? And most of all, I think today is kind of do some myth busting around grant making and, and not having a touch point with program officers like myself and with Sarah. And so what I'd like to say about the foundation is a little bit about, we are a family foundation. We've been around. Jenny Olson Rasmussen created the foundation back in 1955 to really honor her late husband, E.A. Rasmussen. And if you're not familiar with the story, the foundation really, got started when Elmer Rasmussen left the majority of his money to the foundation. So he could have left it in a variety of other places, right? But he really wanted to form a local foundation that really works to promote a better life for Alaskans. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the very first grant that they gave out was like a $140 grant for a copy machine for an organization to be able to start to sort of like document their processes. The foundation itself they came from their bankers from the East Coast. They're from Unalakleet and have really strong ties in Southeast Alaska. Just recently, what I wanted to kind of tell you so far with the quarters of our grant making since the beginning of this year, we've given out $17.8 million throughout the state of Alaska. And we do funding in a variety of different areas. So I just wanted to kind of let everybody know that the Family Foundation is really here to have big impact across the state. And we do that through a variety of different program. So if you haven't gone to our website and poked around a little bit, I would do so. The most common piece of our grant making is our tier ones. Our tier ones are grants up to $25,000. Can I see, and even like online, please use the chat so that I can field questions if I need to. But how many of your organizations have received either a tier 1 or a tier 2 from the foundation? Okay. Wow. So I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 organizations out of the room. So what I would say also about our grant making, and this is the fun part of my job, is our job as a program officer is to really advocate for your project and to get to the yes. So what I would say is that 98.5% of the grants that come in to our into our foundation are usually awarded. We do capital projects. So I think this is really important for some of you to remember and to be thinking about, is that we like to build things. We like equipment like copy machines, x-ray machines. We like to publish like physical books, which would be really great for, and with the archiving process, technology, playgrounds, greenhouses, buildings, like the infrastructure to actually build the foundation so that the work can actually be done. We do give to primarily non-for-profit, so you need to be a 501c3. We will sometimes give, with exceptions, to a 4 or a 6, depending on whether or not you are a government agency. So we're never gonna pay for admin operations, but we will pay for like consultants, someone very specifically to come in and help you meet your goal. No roads, no sewer, no water. Those are all government functions that the foundation really feels that the municipality or the city should take care of. But we do make exceptions. What I always say is, like, always come to us and ask us whether or not you're eligible. We give to tribes and tribal non-for-profits. So, but not the Alaska Native corporations. So, but typically, right, out of the 11 corporations that are across the state of Alaska, they all have a 501c3 arm, right? So you want to think about, if you don't hold your own 501c3, is to think about a partnering organization that you could really go in on a particular project for. The process is really simple. Like, we do these intake calls. So you just call the foundation. There are, I want to say, 11 of us on the program team that deal with all sorts of these types of questions, tier 1s, tier 2s, the IAA program, which I'll talk about in a little bit, sabbatical. We do project related investments, which are like PRIs. So we buy buildings. So just really pick up the phone, talk about your idea. We will actually help shape it so that you're really positioned well for a successful application when it comes in to the organization to be read and reviewed. We really like to have, like, before you kind of, have the conversation and then submit your application, go through the checklist that's on our website. It's super simple. We're actually trying to simplify it even more so that it's not a barrier to submitting your application. That is the last thing that we want to do, is be sort of the gatekeepers of funding. And especially if you don't have the technology we will also accept Word applications. It's not our ideal, but we will do that, which is, we do have an online portal. So if you don't have a username and a password, we have a grants team that specifically can help you get set up to make the process as smooth as possible. And the thing about the tier 1s is there's no deadline. So these are rolling grants. We did recently just change that you can only have one tier 1 per calendar year. But as soon as you close out that tier 1, you can apply for another one. So they usually take about 2 to 3 months in the rotating cycle from the time that you submit your application to the time it gets assigned a program officer to our peer review. Then it goes to senior leadership for review, and then it's usually the announcement of the award will go out. So all of those things. The other thing about tier 1s is you don't need matching dollars. If you're a first-time grantee, most of the time we won't grant a full $25,000, but you can usually, range anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 for that first tier 1. What I always like to say to new grantees is get that tier 1 in, have it be a super clean ask. Like you need $20,000 to purchase technology for your organization. Try not to bundle your tier 1s, multiple different areas, because what we'll want to do is tease that out. And once you successfully get a tier 1, then we will typically, you are strategically positioned then to think about a tier 2, which is the next process of sort of the larger grant making that we do here in the state. What I would say though is that we have a lot of organizations that apply annually for a tier 1. So it's just something to think about. I think you can either contact grants, or at the end of this presentation, right, we're going to answer questions. I'm willing to do one-on-one calls. I usually do that pretty much every day. I will have 1 or 2 intake calls with a grantee. And if I don't know a specific, because I'm fairly new at the organization as well, so I've been there about 1.5 years. If I don't know, I have a team of people that I can really rely on. So are there any questions before I move on to the tier 2 process around the tier 1 grant making? I don't see anything in the chat.
None here for now.
Okay, great. So I'll go to tier 2s. How many of you had a tier 2? Okay, none of you have had a tier 2. Kind of a tier 2, maybe a tier 2. Do you want to share what that was?
Do you know what it was? Your school. Okay.
Yeah, tier 2s are a little bit, they have multiple steps for a tier 2. They're usually $25,000 and above. Usually, depending on what your project is, they're anywhere, like I would say the average tier 2 is about $100,000 to $400,000. If you have an ask, so I know that there's, we work with a lot of museums. So that's the other thing I would say, that the family loves libraries. They love museums, exhibits. I mean, all this work that you guys are doing, cultural heritage, these things are kind of like a shoe-in. I think the thing that you have to think about in terms of a tier 2 is what is that project? Who are your partners? A tier 2, you do need to have, and what I would say is the foundation likes to be the last money in on a tier 2. So they want to make sure that you have at least 50% of the funding, if not more, secured. So you want to start, and the other thing we will always ask is, who are your local partners? Have you gone to the Alaska Native corporations? Have you gone to your local community foundation? So have you gotten local sponsorships? Who else are the players that are going to help you be successful in making sure that you're able to implement the tier 2? So the more partners, the stronger their proposal. the more funding secured and or pending, the stronger proposal, as well as strong leadership. So the other thing our board looks at is who is the executive director of the organization. You know, Alaska's a small state. It's a big state, but it's a small state as well. And so everybody knows everybody. Who's your leader? Who's on your team? Who's on your board? They do require 100% board giving, and that really is about, you know, if the organization is willing to put in their own money, then the foundation really wants to meet that and match that. And so it's really, when we're talking about board giving, it's money that is whatever it is significant and meaningful to that particular individual. You can fill out that board giving anonymously. Say you have 9 board members, it can be 9 board members, board seat 1 through 9, and then the dollar amount, and it can be anonymous. So we do, you know, welcome that confidentiality within an organization. And so if it is a tier 2 and it's above $500,000, then it will go to a sort of an interim second process where it goes to our grants committee. Grants committee is anything over $500,000. So right now I'm working with a couple of museums. They have, you know, it's a $1.2 million ask, and I think the other one's a $1.8 million ask. You know, those are much larger grants. They go to grants committee. Sometimes grants committee will come back and say, you've asked for 1.2 million and we're only going to give you 800,000. They want to see the other part of that funding matched by other community members, other foundations, other support. So we really do look for that solid financial support throughout the community, and also your timeline. So we want your timeline to be realistic. I mean, we spend a lot of time looking at, like, can they actually get this done in the amount of time that they say they are? So what we know about Alaska and what we know after the pandemic is that the contingencies within your grants need to be padded. Like, we're actually asking organizations, when their grants come in, to build in 3 to 6 months in addition to your timeline, and also at least 25% contingency, especially if you're building anything for supplies, materials, barging, shipping, all of those things. We are in the process of granting a lot of extensions right now, which we are fine with, because that's just the nature of the landscape. And so what I would say too is, you know, tier 2s are, again, capital. You know, you see our name on a lot of buildings right now. Housing is a big one for us. We're moving into broadband. We are doing a lot of the support around the universities. So some really big projects around the state around tier 2s. What I will also say is tier 2s, our cycle is twice a year. So, you know, you typically will be, you don't have to be invited to submit a letter of inquiry. It's always good to have a conversation with us so that we know it's coming in. An LOI is really a one-pager that, like, you know, synthesizes your project, your timeline, how much money do you want, where are you going with it. Once we review that and we see where the project is, then there's an invitation for full proposal, and those come in twice a year, February 15th and July 15th. So July 15th is for our upcoming November board meeting. And what I would say is that we really look at the slate of projects based on the strongest proposals to put in front of the board. So again, as a program officer, I go in, I sort of advocate for your project, and then the board ultimately will approve it. Once it's approved, like our board meeting is coming up on November 16th, we know that day whether or not your proposal has been awarded. There's a few steps in between that where, you know, we will work on your proposal together. There's always a site visit. So like today, if I was going to be in Valdez, I was going to have a site visit at 4 o'clock this afternoon because we have a project there for the November board meeting, but that didn't happen. But again, it is, again, a lot of the tier 2 process is really about relationship building. These are bigger asks, longer term projects, pretty significant in the community around impact. And what I would say is that we get anywhere, I think our docket in November is close to 42 tier 2s. So they're not small asks. And a lot of times what we'll do is, based on your idea, the sooner you get it in, the better, so that we can say, maybe it's not ready for the November board meeting, but it's like on our radar. And we'll say, let's submit this in June of 2023. So some of the grants that are coming in right now that we're reviewing and that like are on my docket and my dashboard are going to go to the June docket just because of timing. And they need more funding. They need another partner, whatever it is. There's so much nuances to sort of that conversation. But so that's tier 2s. Any questions about tier 2s? At this point, I know I'm just rattling off all of our things.
I don't see none here.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about 2 other projects that I don't know that people are aware of. One is the sabbatical program. So this is for leaders, CEOs who have been in their role. And I think we're actually going to change it. We just did a committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, but you need to be in your role for 3 years and with the organization for 5, or in the non-for-profit sector for 5. And sabbatical is really, you can either nominate yourself or you can, somebody can nominate you. We typically give out $40,000 to about 6 or 7 CEOs per year to go on sabbatical for 3 to 6 months. Now the organization, right, has to pay for the taxes of your salary, but the remainder of that funding is really given to the organization to allow the CEO to really step into a renewal process. And I actually have had the the honor of working at the 4-acre group and supporting sabbatical. When the CEOs and the leaders go on sabbatical, I was supporting their team, their interim team, and their board of directors in this gap. The goal is that the CEO literally steps back from the organization for a good amount of time to get rejuvenated. And what the research shows is that any executive director across the non-for-profit sector has a 3-year sweet spot. The first year is this honeymoon stage. The second year is where you're really starting to understand your job and your role and your relationship with the board, which is the most important relationship you can have as a CEO in an organization. And by the 3rd year, you've pretty much dialed in all the nuances of the job, and you're actually asking yourself, is this an organization I want to be at? Which is why we give it at the 3-year mark, is because we really want executive directors to stay in the sector, to stay at their organization for longer than 3 years. In an ideal world, right, 5 to 7 years is sort of the sweet spot for an ED in non-for-profits. What it does is it gives them an opportunity to get rejuvenated. It also provides the team that's at the organization an opportunity to step in and lead. And it provides the board an opportunity to rethink some of their strategic goals. We always say when the ED steps back, the interim team steps in, but they hold the ship steady, right? So no big changes. I did have a team like rearrange the office and move their CEO office while she was gone. And that was very disruptive. She was not very happy about that. And like there was this moment in time where it was like, okay, maybe we need to actually say that, like, don't move their laptop, don't change offices, like, don't do any hiring, like, no surprises. Nobody likes to be surprised, is what I like to say. So, but it's a really amazing program. That actually happens every September. We're in the process right now of interviewing 10 CEOs. I'm always pleasantly surprised at how many people are nominated or they nominate themselves. And I just think it's really great for you if you're the CEO or you have a CEO that really needs a break to kind of think about the sabbatical program. Have any of you, do you know anybody in the room or online who've taken a sabbatical? Doesn't look like it. So now you have that in your cap, so you can think about who needs to go on a break.
That's the question. Who needs
what?
Some people raised their hands when you said, who needs to go on a break?
We all need a, right? We all need to go on a break. There are a couple of organizations who have been awarded a sabbatical who then did implement like a mini sabbatical for staff and middle management. Because I think we can all agree, right? Like stepping away from your job longer than a week or 2 weeks is a completely different kind of transformational experience. If you're gone for a month or even 6 weeks. So just be thinking about that. The last grant opportunity I'm going to talk about is the Individual Artist Awards. This year, we are actually about to go into our Project Award and Fellowship Award celebration. I think it's October 7th. So we award 20. This is the only grant making that we actually give a grant to an individual. Every other grant that we award is to an organization. So this is very unique. We give $25, $7,500 project awards out in 11 different disciplines. And then we give 10 $18,000 fellowship awards. We also give one $40,000 Distinguished Artist Award for a mature artist that has really contributed to the arts and culture field around Alaska. The application process is a little, I would say, probably the more complex than any of our other ones, and only because there's a rating, and we hire and contract with panelists from outside the state of Alaska to do the review process, which takes a much longer period of time. I always say IIA, and I support this grant making as well, is year round. Like, we're always doing something around the Individual Artist Awards. But we do believe, and our CEO, Diane Kaplan, believes wholeheartedly that the arts are important, which one of the things is that, we don't have local Alaskans reviewing any of the applications. It is really an outside panel of artists that are selected, or that interviewed and reviewed and selected to be a part of the process, so that there is really no sort of bias, unconscious bias around the art, because it is a small state and we all know so many of everybody in the artists around the state. So if you are interested in that, Inzina is the person to really talk to. You can talk to me. I mean, I work on it as well, but she's really the lead in this space. The other thing about the Individual Artist Awards is that you do get, what was I going to say? Oh, there's a part of it that you also, as an artist, get professional development in addition to, if awarded the grant. So we really are starting to create more of a cohort of awardees so that artists are not feeling so isolated, especially artists in rural Alaska, and making sure that it is the grant making. Again, there are no barriers to submitting the artwork online. And what I would also say about the connection to Museums Alaska with the IAA award is that the grant making that the Museums Alaska does is to really purchase art for your collections. And I help run the Rasmuson office art program, which we get to loan. We get to get loans from all of the museums to hang in our office. So I work very closely with Dixie on that, as well as Art Cares, to really make sure that when our board members come into the office, or any of our grantees, they see just such amazing Alaska art throughout our offices. And we rotate that every, I don't know, it seems to be every 6 months. So I'm going to try to slow that down because it's a lot of work. But it really is amazing. So what this is really the Individual Artist Award and Museums Alaska is an opportunity to revitalize the arts and make sure that we are supporting local art and local artists across the state. It's another really great program. Anybody know an Individual Artist Awardee, or are you one? Did I see a hand in the back or no?
And a couple hands for folks that know some of them. Yes.
Yeah, know some of them. Yeah. So again, you guys work with so many creative people in your profession, in your day-to-day. It's just great to encourage people to apply. It's very competitive. What I would say is that we only give out, 35 awards, and we always have close to 300 applicants. So it is very competitive. But what we want people to do is continue to apply and don't get discouraged with the process. And I think that's kind of the end of our 4 big buckets that really pertain to work that you might be doing in your organizations. Basically, we want you to call us, pick up the phone. You have a direct line now to me at the foundation. I carry my cell phone around. That's kind of, I'm always on. And our goal is really to position your application for success. So I always say, like, how do I get to yes with you? And how do we shape this so that you're building infrastructure in your organization, starting with tier 1s and building up to a potential tier 2, right? So we know when our non-for-profits are financially supported, they're thriving organizations. And so I can't encourage you enough to just reach out and have a conversation with us. And the foundation is, we're not a big scary organization, even though we're a large grant with the largest grant maker. It really is about a partnership. So are there any questions before I pass it over to Sarah?
I want to say thank you for all the great work that you're doing on that, and that the Rasmuson Foundation supports you so well.
Can you hear any of that, Monica?
I couldn't.
Other Monica spoke up and said she just wants to say thank you for all of the support and the great work that the Rasmussen Foundation is doing in supporting Alaskan institutions.
Yeah, is that Monica Shaw?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Monica. Yeah, it's wonderful. We're very lucky to have the family.
Yeah, wow.
In the field.
I'm sitting here just thinking how many folks I've talked to in so many states that would kill for this kind of state focused funding for these types of programs, because that's one of the reasons I was so excited to get to present with Monica is her programs kind of complement a lot of what I cannot fund, which I will talk to about in a minute. So it was great. And then we're going to talk a little bit about leveraging funding, but also just your whole philosophy, Monica, on getting people to the yes and being very open and saying that's what our job is to help you make your dreams come true, right? Like, and see how we can get you through to be able to be successful is what we want too. So
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just so and I just put like the last slide is just how to connect with us in multiple ways. So don't be a stranger. Okay, I'll stop sharing.
Great.
And pass it over to you.
Any other questions for, we'll have time after me too, if you think of some while we go. Okay, now I have to figure this out. Here we go. And something tells me everyone's going to be able to see my notes, so I might have to share this with no notes. Let's see. Yep. You guys can't see my notes. Can everyone online see my notes? Bethany or Mary or Monica?
Yeah, we can see your notes, Sarah.
Okay.
Can you start from the beginning? At the top left.
I can do display settings maybe. I don't want to do that. Maybe I will just turn off. Usually there's a way to do, sorry, everybody. It's been a while since, nope, it does notes.
Sarah, I think if you go to the far left where you were from current slide, go to from beginning.
Yeah, that's what I did first, Monica, and it still pops up in presenter mode. There's a way to turn off presenter mode.
There is.
But sorry. It's been a while since I've done this. Disable annotation now. Well. Nope, now you guys see them.
It says turn off presenter view before presentation begins. On the PowerPoint menu, select preferences.
Oh my gosh.
The file to exit out of presentation.
Okay. Do you know what? I don't know if I care that much. people online see them. That way you guys can catch my mistakes when I, okay, exit this. What's that? Okay. From beginning. All right. Well, my apologies to the people online, the two of you, that you get to see my little notes, but I'm gonna not really go off of my notes completely here today. Those are mostly for me to remember what the heck I'm talking about, since IMLS, big federal agency, like I said, lots of acronyms. I worked there for 3 years a while back, but many things had changed since I was last there. So I've been trying to get back up to speed on all the current programs and everything. And it's just sometimes I need my notes to remember what the heck I'm doing. But as Monica's first slide kind of showed a little bit about IMLS. So is everybody in here, are you guys familiar with who we are and what we do? I've been pretty surprised. I thought like no one outside of DC really cares. I didn't know what IMLS was until I started working for them and was like, what is this job that I'm doing? But Institute of Museum and Library Services. So, well, so have who's gotten IMLS grants then in the past? Oh, lots of couple hands over that side. Oh, really? Okay, we'll talk. Well, so good. So we've got some people that have gotten some before. Has anybody ever applied but not gotten it, but gotten rejected? Okay. Oh, we got a couple of those too. So we can, you can yell at me too. I take it. That's fine. But we're essentially, what I like to tell folks is we're the Department of Museums and Libraries. We are an independent federal agency. So technically our director reports to the White House. We're in the executive branch. And we're one of the smallest federal agencies out there. There's about 60 people on staff. And like we sound, we are kind of we're the primary, so not kind of, we are the primary source of federal funding for museums and libraries libraries across our country. The library side is a little more structured in a way that, you know, they're good at counting things too, obviously, and very organized. So all the state library systems that then have county library systems and local library systems, there are formula grants that our library side runs where there's this big, huge pot of money, and then they apply some algorithms based on population and things. And so the states kind of get this automatic money. We do not have those on the museum side, these kind of auto formula grants. Ours are all discretionary, AKA competitive grants. So everything I'm about to go over today, you basically just keep in mind, and I'll talk through it all, but you're competing against other institutions each round. And these are our 4 current agency strategic goals in our current strategic planning process. I think it covers 2022 to 26 or something like that. So we try to support all things that museums and libraries do. So these are obviously very broad, but you know, when you think of the purpose that museums, libraries serve in communities, in you know, your local cities, towns, wherever, it's to promote lifelong learning for all ages, strengthen community engagement, and by that we mean all communities, advance your collections, care, stewardship, preservation, access, all of that. And then a 4th one that's more of an internal one for us at IMLS is to demonstrate excellence in public service. Since we are public servants, we are government employees, your tax dollars help pay our salaries. And so everything we do, we want to do with integrity and, you know, with making sure that we are all committed to the mission. And that's one of the other reasons I love working with museums and libraries is it's rare that you come across people that aren't committed to what the mission of all of this. So we're constantly trying to improve our processes and get feedback and go out there and say, does this work? Does this not work? How can we do better? So today, what I'm going to talk about are our 6 current museum grant programs that we have running this year. And these have been kind of most of these have been around, some for years, and some are a little bit newer, like 4 or 5 years. But these are all the active ones for FY 2023 coming up. They're all available right now to apply to. And I'm going to go over a few other special initiatives as well. I'll actually talk about these quickly. I did, if anybody's gotten coffee or anything here in person, I threw a bunch of materials out there on the coffee table because Dixie told me that's the table most people would be visiting. But you're welcome. I have more here too. So I have one pager that's kind of the rundown of all of our grant programs, museum grant programs. I've got some brochures about the MAP and CAP programs that I'll talk about. And then I have a one pager about the Native American, Native Hawaiian Museum grant program, because that's the one that I oversee in my portfolio too. And then we have a number of other initiatives and things. So are people familiar with MAP and CAP? Have you guys, I'm seeing nods. Okay. I like to gauge, so I'm not telling you stuff you already know. And all of this, I should say, you know, our website has everything. Or you're like, I don't want to look at your website. I want to call you, talk to you, tell me what's up, or come grab me face to face. We can do that too. So MAP, CAP, should I go over them at all? Or Museum Assessment Program, Conservation Assessment Program. IMLS's role in that is we are the funding for those, but then they're administered through MAP is the American Alliance of Museums, AAM, and CAP, it used to be Heritage Preservation, RIP, and now it's the FAIC, the Foundation for the Advancement of, yes, go ahead. Yeah. Great.
Why maybe not want to have a one hand? I just don't know.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And actually the CAP program is where I first started working in like kind of federal funding world and left kind of museum touch the objects world and went on to CAP. So it's also under my portfolio. I actually oversee the CAP program agreement that we have with the FAIC. And you can come back in and redo your cap. I think there's a number of years that you have to kind of wait between when you last did it and when it's like 10 years or 15. Yeah, okay, so you're probably good. And then MAP, right, there's a number of different ones. So there's conservation assessment program, brings in technical assessors, professional conservators. Your institution is I'd guess, even at this point, I mean, it's pretty big. The CAP program is specifically meant to cover small museums. Basically the judgment of in the CAP program of what constitutes small is, can a person who's visiting go through and see everything within 2 days, a 2-day assessment. If they can look at your building, look at your collections, and write up their report based on what they are able to assess within 2 days. So that's kind of the parameter to think about for CAP. MAP does not have a small or large parameter, and that's because they have a lot of different categories of maps, and that's a peer review kind of assessment where folks that have been doing this, I mean, any of you, has anyone here been a map assessor? Okay, so, oh, okay, or CAP assessor? Okay, because it's people in the field, it's people that do this work too, and there's, you know, networks of these folks, and so they can help you with things like your board governance. They can look at your policies, procedures, documentation, making sure it's all with the kind of goal of, they also do a collections one, but all with the goal in mind of helping like raise the professional standards as though you were going for accreditation by AAM. So it's ways to get feedback from folks in the field who have done this kind of thing. So it's like a self-evaluation process. And so those are annual as well. You can always definitely go back through, like, let's say you had one for boards and governance one time, but now you're thinking like, oh, we could really use some on like our DEIA work that we're doing. There's absolutely, you can do that more than once. Encourage it. And basically what those two assessment programs do is we provide, they provide some of the funding to offset the cost of that. Since I'm on here, I'll just really quickly mention these others because I'm going to talk much more about our grant programs. But Save America's Treasures, has everyone heard of that one? That's a grant program that's actually technically run by the National Park Service. It's through the Historic Preservation Act fund, but IMLS and then our sister funding agencies, the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities, NEA and NEH, if you've heard of those, they also sometimes help run and administer, but typically it's IMLS and Park Service. Park Service takes the historic preservation ones, aka like the historic ships that are being restored, the buildings that are being restored, things like the historic preservation restoration, and we do the collections. That's the two buckets in Save America's Treasures. And really the qualifier with SAT is your collection has to have, or your site has to have national significance in some way, and you just have to make that case as to why it is. Yeah, okay. Museums for All. I have materials out front about this. This is another initiative of IMLS that we fund, and it's actually administered by the Association of Children's Museums. And the gist about this one is museums can join on as members of this, and it's essentially a commitment to offer low or reduced, free or reduced admission to members of your community that present their SNAP, the EBT cards for like low-income folks, to help broaden that access, right, for folks. And so there's a huge network of museums now that more and more join every year, and they do some great initiatives and work, and it's just like one more kind of resource out there for you to think about. Museums for Digital Learning is one of the newer things that I'm not as familiar with, but it's basically building a cohort. We're helping fund to build, it's a partnership between a number of different places to start, especially in light of COVID, we're realizing like we need more museum educational resources available online all the time, everywhere for everyone. So the gist is putting together resources for K-12 educators to have basically a one-stop shop of content, authentic museum, curated and museum educated content that turn into these resource kits that then can be available on any type of subject, any type of museum. And so we are, that's another one where museums can opt in to contribute material or a kit to that. So it's kind of supposed to be like a central hub for that. The National Medal for Museum and Library Service, it's a fun thing we do every year. We accept nominations. Self or others can nominate for museums and libraries that are just going above and beyond to serve their communities. And we've had many an Alaskan institution have been nominated and even won in the past. And so it's a fun way to celebrate the amazing work museums and libraries do. And at least when I used to be there, we used to bring the folks out from each museum. I think it's 5 museums, 5 libraries who ultimately get the medals each year. And they'd come to the White House for a ceremony with the First Lady, which was always really cool. And I got to meet Michelle, and it was awesome. So that kind of dropped off during the last administration, unfortunately, but we're trying to get back to that because it was something that started, I don't know if Laura Bush started it, but because she was a librarian, but it's another really fun initiative of ours. And then also coming up, the semi-quincentennial. I practice saying that word. It's America's 250th is coming up, and so IMLS is trying to make sure that we have a seat at the table with all of these other bigger agencies, the White House, the executive folks, to make sure that museums and libraries are represented and their stories are told, and that all the work that we have done for years in inclusivity and these things about, okay, it's great, we're going to celebrate the country's birthday, but like, what does that look like for everybody? And recognizing that museums and libraries do that work better than many, if not all, other institutions, to make sure we have a seat at the table. So that's coming up 2026. We're always looking for ways we're starting to ramp that up, and it's America 250 is the name of is the catchy name they've decided on. And that's, again, a bunch of different agencies. So I was actually getting a little bit involved in that at the Park Service too while I was there. So lots of things happening. So, but really want to focus on, because these are more of the bread and butter of what we do, is our grant programs. We have specific recorded webinars for all of our 6 programs that you guys can watch. They're not too long, I promise. And those get into some of the meat that I'm going to cover, like very high level, quick stuff here. Those webinars are a little bit more in depth. And then the real in depth, like all the details, all the guidance is in the notices of funding opportunities, or NOFOs for short. So those are basically the grant guidelines, the grant application instructions. So that's really, those NOFOs are like the crucial thing to know about and to keep in mind. And then of course, we're going to Monica and I both say this over and over again. You can always call us, contact us. IMLS staff are all super friendly. I stayed friends with all of them when I left there originally. It's a big reason why I wanted to go back. They're just great people who all share passions about helping get to the yes and helping you out. So, and the reason I'm really thrilled about the timing of this conference is because our application deadline is coming up for all 6 of our museum programs this year. November 15th is the deadline at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. That's important because if you submit it at 12:01 or midnight and 3 seconds, the system kicks you out. Unfortunately, you are considered late. It's one of those things. I'd love if anyone's interested in, and Monica touched on this, ways and feedback on breaking down the barriers to applications and this application process and this burdensome federal grant process, which I 100% like see and witness. And I'm just like, we need voices to support, so that when I say, so it's not just coming from me, right? When I'm telling people like, folks can't use those systems because their internet it might be down. And so therefore we need to like have other workarounds to be more equitable. And we're looking at all of that right now. Like there's some assessments going on, some internal work, but I am a big advocate for making things simpler, and unfortunately don't have the flexibility always that I think like a foundation that's not federal sometimes can swing. But that's another reason why we say call us, because we can help support and get you through wherever we can. I feel like, does anybody ever watch the Incredibles movie? So, you know, when he's like trying to help the old lady get the insurance payments, that's what I feel like a lot of the time, where I'm just like, okay, do it this way and I'll help you out. And I did that with the NAGPRA grants too, because it was like ridiculous that being a gatekeeper of money for that type of work is just, there's a power opposite there that I won't get into right now, or they'll kick me out of the government. So here are the basic here's the basic layout, a little bit of the basic info for each of our 6 programs. I couldn't fit everything on the slide, but it's kind of the need to know. So MFA, Museums for America, it's our largest grant program. It's the most awards that we make every year. It's kind of the bread and butter. Its grants range between 5 and 250. They do require a 1-to-1 cost share, which means, you know, you have to provide as much in kind that you are asking for, which is a great place to segue with Monica, because she and I were talking and preparing this about how, well, like if someone gets an IMLS grant for, you know, $50,000 or $100,000, but then can also get a Rasmussen Foundation grant, and they require that, you know, there you go, you've got your match. So it's a interesting way to think about playing with, because we hear often, you know, especially from smaller places, matching funds are not easy to always, you know, if you can't just use your massive volunteer base as time to count up those hours or whatnot, you might not have other foundations the way you do here that could help with that. So things to think about and talk about. The MFA categories, they mirror our strategic ones exactly. It's the lifelong learning, community engagement, collections. So you basically, if you were to pull that up, you'd look at it and say, okay, I think I really want to do some programs, you know, education programs. I want to pay for some field trips. I want to help fund the buses to run kids here. And then I need some staff members that are going to teach them, and then like develop this curriculum or whatever, exhibits. That's, you know, learning. Community engagement is a little bit more, is there a need outside the community that they've helped identify, that they've helped you come up with, or that you've observed, and how do you support that in your role, right? Museums do everything from teaching about clean energy and food deserts and you know, botanical gardens, all that sort of stuff. So things from the community. And then collections, stewardship, and access, kind of a little more straightforward, but we fund conservation, anything really that has to do with collections care. What we don't fund, well, I'll get a little bit to what we don't fund, but some of the things we don't, that Monica specifically mentioned, we can't fund capital projects, so building things. We can't fund construction, and that's a federal you know, that's a federal thing. So we can fund your new shelving systems, your you know, beautiful compact shelving. We can fund HVAC sometimes, as long as you like don't use the word construction in your application. Hint. But other things like acquisition of collections, we cannot fund, versus Monica, I believe, said you guys can help fund the purchase of things. So there's some interesting contrast there. The reason I've outlined, I should have said this first, the reason that MFA, Inspire, and the Museums Empowered 3 are kind of outlined together is they all have the same eligibility, which is you have to be a museum to apply. I'm going to talk more about what that means in a minute, like what a museum is for how to know if you think you might be eligible, or you can always call us and ask. The Inspire grants are our small, it's an initiative out of the Museums for America grant program. They're Inspire grants for small museums. And that was from lots and lots of feedback we were getting of folks saying, we're small, we don't want to be competing against the Met and the San Diego Zoo and the Field Museum and all these huge places. We need our own small category. So we said, okay, and also the cost share issue, right? So those are 5,000 to 50 grand, no cost share required, and they are evaluated against each other instead of against the huge full Museums for America pool. We still get quite a few applications in every year, so they're still a little competitive, but at least you're a little bit more on the same playing field, right? And it's all disciplines. And again, there's 3 categories. And instead of community engagement, one of those 3 is institutional capacity. So that looks much more like a building, whatever that looks like for that institution, building up capacity. Our kind of theory or our process in going through all of these is that museums know what they need. Museums know best, you know, like what kind of projects, what kind of work, what kind of funding. And so while we have these categories, we've tried to keep them very, very broad, that to capture almost everything that museums do, so that you can then make your own case to us. Like, we don't want to be the government dictating to all museums, like, you need to fund this specific thing all the time. But then when we get feedback from folks in the field that say, well, hey, we really want something that's going to help us do more internal assessments and internal staff work and evaluation and help us with our diversity and inclusion, we create new programs like Museums Empowered, which is the ME up there. And that is one of our newer ones. It's also out of the MFA initiative, but that is really focused on using training, professional development to generate change within an organization. So it's much more inward focused. And as you can see, we fund things like the digital technology, there's diversity inclusion, if you want trainings or things like that, doing any sort of self-evaluation of, you know, your membership programs, or and then organizational management. So it's a little similar to the the MAP assessment in a way, but you know, but it's a grant funding and you're doing it yourself, as opposed to having AAM send peer reviewers out to you. Okay, so those are the 3 that are restricted to museums as applicants. And the next 3 all have slightly different applicants that are eligible. The National Leadership Grants for Museums, museums can apply for that and often do, but also institutions or organizations that serve the museum field. So for example, Museums Alaska, I don't think they are a museum under the definitions, but they serve a museum community. Their primary mission is to serve museums. So they could apply for a National Leadership Grants for museums, if that makes sense. And there's several different categories and tiers. It's our largest as far as funding, because as you see, those go up to 750K. And those projects essentially are meant to help propel the museum field forward. So as opposed to the other 3 that are all your individual museum, you're applying, it's your project, your mission, you need money to do whatever your work is. This is, okay, we're doing this fabulous program that's gotten like unbelievable success and response, and we think this could be a model for the country, for the entire museum field, or we want to do research on whatever it is that we think could, then we would disseminate it out, share it out across the whole field, and every museum across the country, or every botanical garden across the country, or whatever, you know, every zoo could benefit from this. So those are much more like meant to be innovative and steering the ship forward a little bit more, rather than just how can we help you conserve your own collections. AAHC is our African American History and Culture grants. Those are split into 2 tiers of smaller and larger. Again, so no match and 1-to-1 match. And that was again a response to try to like make sure small African American history organizations could apply. Yes, Monica.
So the National Leadership Grant, what is the
Yes. So
no
I knew someone was going to ask that, and I'm going to have to go down to my notes because I wrote it real quick. This is the one that it's changed since I was last there. Okay, rapid prototyping is one of the, so there's the 3 kind of types of NLG projects. Rapid prototyping is to let a museum try like an innovative new approach to something that you want to rapidly develop, test, do iterations, retest. So it's just like, we think we want to try the this new touch technology in this one exhibition hall. And so just like quickly do it, evaluate. It's supposed to be rapid, what it sounds like. And those are just 1 year, 5 to 50K. Oops. And of course I just lost it. Here we go. And I think those do have a match. No, those don't have match required, no cost share required. Research projects are posing questions of importance to the field, using accepted research methodologies to collect, analyze, and share the data that answers those questions. They can range from 50K to 750K for projects that are 1 to 3 years and no cost share required. So for the research thing, that's the other one with no cost share. Non-research projects support projects that to scale efforts resulting in tools and resources for the field. And those can be up 50 to 750K, 1 to 3 years, and do require a 1-to-1 cost share. I couldn't fit all that on the slide. Should have had 2 slides. So African American history and culture grants, like it's kind of sounds, the point is to help build the capacity of that genre of museums and support the growth and development of museum professionals at African American museums and also at HBCUs. So historically Black colleges or universities. So that's why there's the eligibility starts getting a little bit different, where we don't say that they have to be a museum to apply necessarily. And with NLG grants, like I said, there could be organizations, universities, things that may not have a museum specifically, but can still do this work. Gosh, I gotta stop doing that. And then NANH, Native American, Native Hawaiian, as I mentioned, that is one of the ones, all of us staff work on all of these programs pretty much, but so each senior program officer kind of has a assigned portfolio within our expertise and interest areas and such. And since I've worked with Native American tribes for my whole career and am Wyandotte, although you would never know it to look at me, that is why one of the reasons IMLS brought me back was to help run this program and as well as all of our initiatives and outreach and things that we're focusing now that they're going to do a better job with this. So like they sound, it supports Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations, Indian tribes, including Alaska Native villages and Alaska Native corporations, to do anything that helps sustain heritage, culture, and knowledge. You know, we used to say museum services, but you didn't have to have a museum to apply it. It's the legal applicants and recipients here are the tribes or Native Hawaiian or serving organizations. So that's why it's like museum services doesn't necessarily mean anything for them, but it's all about sustaining heritage and culture, and anything that sounds like it could fit, I'm gonna encourage. So 5,000 to 100,000, no cost share required, no category types. You just tell us they just tell us what they need. Okay, so I want to touch, as if we have time, I want to touch on the eligibility stuff a little bit because I mentioned that a few times, and just make sure that's clear, because that's one of the most common kind of hiccups. And we always want to make sure people, if you're not sure, call us and we can help talk you through. We technically aren't allowed to tell anyone, yes, you're definitely eligible. or no, you're definitely not, until we have a complete application to review. And it's for good reason. You know, we don't want to be telling someone, if, you know, if one program specialist looks at it as like, oh, you're not eligible, and discourages someone from applying, but then ultimately they could have, or the opposite. So that's the technical answer, but I'm happy to talk to anybody if you do have questions like, is it even worth me applying? So the all across the board, all grant applicants have to be either a unit of state, local, tribal government, or a nonprofit, and you have to be located in the 50 US states or any of our partners or territories. So Guam and American Samoa and Puerto Rico and all of those are also eligible to apply. Though I don't think they're ever going to send me to could ask. Okay, so like I said, those top three, Museums for America, Inspire grants, and Museums Empowered, you have to be a museum to apply. But what is a museum, right? There's many different types, and you might not have the word museum in your title, and anything on here and then some, this is not a comprehensive list, could be a museum. The NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity, like I said, the grant guidelines spelled it out for each program. But again, if when in doubt, give us a call. And so here then are the parameters that they have established to kind of describe or narrow down or hone in a little bit more on what is a museum. So museums, to be eligible for those first three programs, have to use a professional staff. That means having at least one staff member or an equivalent to reach full-time. So it could be a part-time paid staff member and a part-time unpaid volunteer. It could be a museum, it could be a 10% time paid person, and the rest of 90% is made up with volunteers. It could be 100% volunteers. As long as you have a staff that does museum work, primarily engaged in like collections care, exhibitions, or whatever museum work you say, that's basically what we mean by professional staff. You have to be organized on a permanent basis for essentially educational or aesthetic purposes. So like your mission statement and whatever we would look at and say, are these guys, is this set up as a museum or is it not? This one's, in my opinion, a little outdated because there's so much digital options out there now, especially with COVID, but I don't make the rules. So you have to own or use tangible objects. So a fully digital, let's say I had a call from a museum that is getting ready to, they want to launch a huge fundraising campaign and they want to eventually open a building with a collection and start collecting, but they're not there yet. So they're only doing educational exhibits and online and virtual things. And so unfortunately, most likely they would not be eligible quite yet as a museum. They could always partner, and that's something Monica mentioned too, is folks can always find ways to kind of get around these a little bit by finding a museum to partner with and do a co-project. But yeah, caring for the objects is what it sounds like. And then exhibiting them to the general public on a regular basis, which is at least 120 days a year. Now that is often a hang up, I've noticed, for small museums or places where there's a very short season of, weather related reasons or whatnot. So that 120 days a year doesn't mean you have to be like wide open doors, everybody come in all the time. It could be like, okay, if someone calls, we'll go unlock the door and like let someone go on a tour and we keep a log. And the 120 days a year also, because of COVID, has really thrown that off the past couple of years. So it can be 120 days leading up to November 15th to the day you apply. It could be 120 days within the past calendar year. It could be 120 days. I think even with COVID, we've managed to like extend that a little bit. So just show us 120 days you've been able to be open. And at least for now, they're being more flexible with that this year. And then all these activities, it's facilities that you own or operate. So if you don't own the building, if the city owns the building, but you're operating the museum that the city owns, right, it still counts. So owns or operates. Any questions about that? kind of it's all written into our legislation, which is why so these are some types of other organizations that may be eligible, right? Colleges, universities, organizations that serve museums, tribes, organizations that serve Native Hawaiians, those HBCUs I mentioned. Like there's kind of, it gets with the different programs, different types of eligibility. I'm harping on this topic a little longer than I meant to, but just because it's so heartbreaking when someone doesn't call us or doesn't, they kind of guess, they read the NOFO and they submit an application and they're not eligible, even if they had a great project. And it's just like, oh, now you have to wait another year. I wish you had called. And so we could have helped guide you into what would work for you. So we do not fund federal institutions like, sorry, Park Service. We partner with them, but we don't fund them. I got a lot of Park Service curators and museum folks like, can we get grant money from you? And it's like, no. For-profits, foreign countries, organizations, and we do not fund any individuals. You cannot apply just for your one project. So different from Rasmussen again, where they do actually have some individual options. You have to be applying. Has to be one of those entities I described. No limit on the number of applications you could submit each year, but they do need to be unique projects. So if you're like, well, I have this project idea, I don't know if I should go in for the small museum program or if I should go for the big Museums for America one, call us up and we'll help talk you through it. But you got to make sure you're submitting a unique project to, don't submit two and try to like play across the thing. And also, if you are submitting multiple applications, which every year people do, just remember, they're going to look at your ability to manage multiple awards and your capacity to do that and put together strong proposals. And it's usually kind of big, huge places that tend to take that on, and sometimes they're successful. It's rare. So here is our a little timeline to give you. I'm jealous when I heard Monica talking about like the 60 to 90 day turnaround, because we do have a pretty extensive peer review process. So what we do is we applications due November 15th, and that deadline's been pretty similar the past few years, stayed constant. So we intake those, us as staff, I think there's 10 of us on the museum side who are doing all the intake, reviewing everything for completeness and eligibility. And then we get them all ready and sorted out, and they go out for review. And it is peer reviewers. So that means people in the field, museum experts, museum professionals. So if we have a collections management project, from a mid-sized museum, we're going to find a bunch of other projects that are kind of fit that. And then we're going to have a panel or a first field and then panel review of folks who will read and score those applications. And those that the field round is first, and those that make it, top scorers go on and then go to panel, which then we have like, it used to be in person. Last couple of years, it's been virtual, sit around, talk about it, pros and cons, and write their comments, put their scores up. And ultimately that ends up with a slate of recommended projects that are, these are scored high enough that we can recommend them for funding, go down the list until we run out of our money. And we put that forward to our director, well, first our deputy director, and then the director, who has the final like authority and responsibility of deciding what gets funded. But almost always we're going to go off of what the experts in the field who do this work, who are people like you guys. Has anyone ever been a reviewer for IMLS here? Monica has. I'm allowed to ask that. I know it's anonymous, but like, don't say when you did it or who you read. But yeah, we are always looking for folks to come be peer reviewers. So you can submit, we're accepting them right now. You submit your interest online, say what you're, interested in reading about or what your background's in. I think you upload like a 2-page resume or something. And then we match folks with what we get in that year. And it's such a good way to see behind the curtain and see how the sausage gets made, right? To see like how this process works and what these proposals come in look like. And then I think people that do that ultimately end up being more successful writing proposals down the line, because they kind of know what's going on. So if you guys are interested in learning more about that, please let me know. AAHC and NANH, our African American and Native American, have just one round. They just do panel review. And so instead of, because we get smaller numbers of applications, we don't need to, we're not getting 800 applications in that need to be kind of narrowed down first, so we can fit all of those in a panel. And that's why they get announced a little sooner in June, and they start July 1st, their projects. And then August, as you can see, the other programs get announced, and those projects all have a start date of September 1st. So that's the upcoming cycle. So it's just year after year. That's what we do. For the sake of time, I think I'm going to kind of skip over all the technical stuff. If anyone has technical questions, please let me know. But this is essentially, if you're interested in applying for our grants, this is what I recommend you do. Watch those webinars I mentioned. They're all on our website. Check eligibility, figure that out first. Then you can figure out which grant program kind of fits your needs or your ideas. If it's collections, if it's learning, if it's community work that you're wanting to do. Read the NOFO, those detailed guidance. And then we have sample applications for all of those programs and all of those categories within each program up on the website. Lots of samples for you to look at and see what other folks have done that's been successful. And we also have all of the grants we've awarded under all of these programs since whenever. You can search. And so you can see who else has gotten grants. What were those grants about? It's kind of just basic blurbs usually, but it's enough to give you kind of a sense of, oh, that's cool. That sounds like a great idea. We should do that. We say read the peer review guidance as well, because that's literally it's in the NOFO. You see what your peer reviewers, what the questions are that they're answering and scoring you on. So you see exactly what you need to make sure you're answering. It's almost like starting from the cheat sheet from the back end, and then write your proposal based on that. Talk with us. We're all friendly. And SAM.gov and grants.gov. I don't know if everybody's familiar with those systems. If you're not, let's chat. SAM.gov is the system for award management. It's a federal system that everybody has to register in now. It basically says, yes, I am a legal entity. I am who I say I am, and it gives you an ID number. It used to be DUNS number. Now it's a UEI. Yes, UEI. And that number, then once you get that and you're registered in SAM, then you use that to go to grants.gov, set up your grants.gov account, and then you can apply. You submit everything and build your application in grants.gov. So it's just a weird set of systems that as feds we have to use, and they're actually pretty intuitive. They have great help desks, but we can always answer questions about those too. So I'm talking too much, but this is our webpage. IMLS.gov/grants is the best place to start. It's got links to all of our stuff. You can find all the program staff. They kind of assign us based on like with those categories. So within Museums for America, for example, there's the learning experiences, community engagement, collections. I think I'm the main contact point for community engagement projects. So you might, when you go on there, you might see other people's names and you can call them. You can always call me too, since you'd be like, I saw you at Alaska. And I'll be like, cool, let's talk about it. Because we can all talk to any of these types of programs. And there's the kind of basics again about SAM.gov and grants.gov. I'm going to skip all these. And here's my info. And then it's just questions time. We went longer than I thought we would. Thanks for your patience. I'm going to leave my contact page up for now. So Monica, anything that you wanted to add or subtract from what I said?
No, excuse me. In the chat, the people online weren't able to follow along with your slides. They weren't advancing, but we can make sure that everybody gets our slide decks so that we can follow along with, because I think you had a lot more detailed information. But again, I would just, both of our websites are probably chock full of all of the nitty-gritty details you need to get started. But I'm just curious if anybody has any questions for myself or for Sarah. I think the session was to end, right? 3:45.
Four.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Well, we're done. I have not paid attention to that the whole time. Well, thanks for sticking around then, everybody. How about you, Monica? Anything last you want to say?
No, I just, I don't want to, I want to be super mindful of everybody's time. And I appreciate you, Sarah, sharing all of the opportunities at IMLS. And again, we, at Rasmussen are just always overwhelmed at the amazing work all of the museums are doing across the state and the libraries. It's really rich, and I'm super excited you guys are in Valdez.
It's pretty cool. We're sorry you couldn't make it.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed.
People are saying they miss you.
No, I really wanted to be at the brewery with all of you tonight.
Yeah, it's gonna be
I'm
good.
so crying inside, big time.
Well, thanks for everybody online. I'm so sorry about the slides, but like I said, we'll share them with you, and hopefully you have our info now. So reach out to us. Everybody here, I have business cards too, and materials. So just give us a call. Okay, thanks everybody.
Great.
Bye. Thank you.